and good evening and a very warm welcome from me on behalf of the entire Irish Studies Würzburg team. I would like to extend a very special welcome to the co-founder of Irish Studies Würzburg, my dear colleague, Professor Ina Bergmann, the president of the Deutsch-Irische Gesellschaft German-Irish Association, Matthias Fleckenstein, and of course, to our distinguished speaker this evening, Professor Nicholas Grene. Now, what is Irish Studies Würzburg, or abbreviated to ESW? It is part of a wider European network of Irish studies under the umbrella of the EFASIS, European Federation of Associations and Centers of Irish Studies. And this rather impressive acronym brings together national associations and around 50 academic centers across more than 25 European countries. So while we are very happy to be here in Würzburg this evening, we are also part of a much larger and a very lively community and a conversation. And here in Würzburg, we aim to create opportunities for exchange and collaboration, so among scholars, PhD researchers, students of English, of course, and just as importantly, anyone with an interest in Ireland beyond academia. And our work spans literature, language, history, and culture from the Republic of Northern Ireland to the global Irish diaspora. And in practice, this means a range of activities like readings, guest lectures like tonight's lecture, workshops, study days, symposia, conferences, and sometimes also the pleasant challenge of organizing cultural events such as the Irish itinerary, all of which tend to bring a welcome splash of green to Franconia. Now, you might ask why Ireland and why here in Würzburg, and the answer goes back quite a long way, because since the Irish monks, which are very famous in Würzburg, Filian, Collinat and Totnan, arrived in Franconia in the 7th century, Würzburg has liked to think of itself as the Irish city on the continent. And one of the treasures of our university library, the Kilian's Evangeliar, is a reminder of these early connections. And it is not only one of our oldest manuscripts, but also something of acquired celebrity, having attracted distinguished Irish visitors over the years, including former President Michael Higgins and former Ambassador Nicholas O'Brien. And the connection is very much alive today. Organizations such as the German-Irish Association, along with numerous cultural initiatives by citizens and local institutions, continue to nurture these ties between Würzburg and the Emerald Isle. So in a sense, Irish Studies here is not just an academic field, it is part of a much longer shared story. And we are delighted to be able to continue that story with events like this evening's lecture. And I'll pass on the word to my colleague, Ina Bergmann.
Yes, thank you very much, Maria. A very warm welcome to all of you from me as well. Today marks the 5th John Millington Synge lecture, which highlights another cultural connection between Ireland and Würzburg. As a young man, John Millington Synge came to Würzburg. In 1894, he spent 6 months here to study music. Eventually, he would return to Ireland, give up music, and start a career in literature. Certainly, Würzburg contributed toward that decision in one way or another. Synge is one of Ireland's best known and considered one of its most influential playwrights. Irish Studies Würzburg has established a yearly Synge lecture around the date of the playwright's birthday on April 16th, co-organized by Deutsch-Irische Gesellschaft Würzburg, German-Irish Society Würzburg, and Irish Studies Würzburg. And this Synge lecture series is meant to highlight this lesser-known connection between Ireland and Würzburg. It is dedicated to introducing new Synge scholarship as well as highlighting the cultural exchange between Ireland and Germany. Irish Study Würzburg is thankful for the ongoing support of this lecture series by both the Deutsch-Irische Gesellschaft Würzburg and the Embassy of Ireland. Previous Synge lecturers include several eminent international Synge experts, such as Patrick Lonergan, W.J. McCormack, Anne Fogarty, and Paige Reynolds. And today is no exception. I'm now passing on to Matthias Fleckenstein, the president of the German-Irish Association of Würzburg, who will introduce today's distinguished guest lecturer, Nicholas Grene.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ina, and a very good evening and a warm welcome also from me on behalf of the German-Irish Association of Würzburg. We are delighted to co-host this year's 5th annual John Millington Synge lecture, together with Irish Studies Würzburg, of course. As we heard, the links between Würzburg and Ireland started more than 1300 years ago with the Irish monk St. Kilian and his companions, and they are still full of energy today, both the links between Würzburg and Ireland and also St. Kilian. You can see him here. He returned to Würzburg recently, so it makes even more fun to talk about Würzburg and Ireland now. Well, today the links are characterized by a very lively exchange between Würzburg and County Wicklow and the town of Bray, including 6 active school exchange programs between Würzburg schools and Irish schools, mainly in Wicklow. And of course, we could celebrate 25 years of the twinning between Würzburg and Wicklow last year, and we look forward to our own anniversary, 40 years later this year. So another big reason to be proud of the Irish town on the continent. Well, 2 years ago, I had the pleasure of meeting Professor Nicholas Grene in Trinity College, Dublin. And over a cup of coffee, we were talking about Würzburg, Synge and Wicklow. You can imagine that I'm more than delighted to welcome Professor Nicholas Grene as our guest speaker today. Nicholas Grene is Emeritus Professor of English Literature at Trinity College, Dublin, a former Senior Fellow of the College and a member of the Royal Irish Academy. He has been an invited lecturer in many countries and visiting professor at the University of New South Wales, Dartmouth, and the Sorbonne. He has written extensively on Synge and for 10 years was the director of the Synge Summer School in Rothdrum, also County Wicklow. Synge and Wicklow, Places to Place, is the subject of today's lecture. Nicholas Grene grew up in rural Wicklow, where Synge has set 3 of his plays, so the places featured in Synge's plays were familiar for Nicholas as a young boy. The aim of this lecture will be to explore how Synge shaped these places into an imaginative geography and combined his local experience and knowledge with elements he heard and found elsewhere, like on the Aran Islands or during his studies in Paris. On behalf of the German-Irish Association of Würzburg, I would like to thank Irish Studies Würzburg, especially Maria Eisenmann and Ina Bergmann, together with their dedicated students team for all their enthusiasm and commitment. And I really look forward to our today's lecture with Professor Nicholas Grene. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Matthias, and to Maria and Ina as well. This is a kind of strange experience for me because I'm staring at a screen which has got my PowerPoints on it, but I can't see any of you. But I take it that I'm there. So if I'm not, somebody will tell me. I'm really, really pleased to be invited to give this lecture. My only regret is that it's done virtually and that I can't actually be in Würzburg, where my wife and I visited a couple of years ago and know just what a wonderful city it is. But anyway, it's lovely to be here, if only virtually. The family of J.M. Synge, the playwright, were substantial landowners in County Wicklow, the county immediately south of Dublin. You may not actually need this map because, as Matthias has just been saying, you have lots of connections with County Wicklow, but there it is. At one point, the Synges owned over 4,000 acres there, some 1,600 hectares. That was not a large property by comparison with the wealthiest landowners in the county. The Fitzwilliams, for example, owned 89,000 acres, but still it enabled them to live in style at Glanmore Castle. However, by the time of the playwright in the later 19th century, those prosperous days were gone. Synge belonged to that class which Bernard Shaw called the downstarts. Upstarts are people who have risen above their original station in the world. Downstarts, according to Shaw, are propertyless younger sons of younger sons. And that is exactly what J.M. Synge was. His father was the 7th child of John Synge, the owner of Glanmore. With no land of his own, he trained as a barrister and practiced in Dublin. Our Synge, if we can call him that, was the youngest of 5. His father died when he was just a year old, leaving his mother to bring up the 5 children on a limited income. All of Synge's brothers found their way into comfortable middle-class employment: engineer, medical missionary, land agent, and his sister married a lawyer. Synge alone, from the family's point of view, drifted aimlessly with some notion of a career in the arts. The Synges were not the grand Wicklow landowners that their predecessors had been, but they still felt the county was their own home territory. Synge's mother, accordingly, looked to spend family holidays in Wicklow and rented houses near to Glanmore when they were affordable. The house she took most often was Castle Kevin. It's now the attractive home of the actor Daniel Day-Lewis, but in Synge's time it was very much a rundown, with its owner having moved to Northern Ireland. There's an evocative description of it in its semi-derelict state in Synge's essay, A Landlord's Garden in County Wicklow. Synge used to accompany his mother on these summer holidays to Wicklow, holidays that would then last for several months, not just the 2 weeks that most of us get to take now. Other members of the family and friends would be invited to spend time there. That's a photo of the writer with his mother, there on the left of the screen, and 2 young guests on the steps of Castle Kevin, that house I'd just shown you the picture of. Synge was a great walker and cyclist and spent most of his days exploring the countryside, either on his own or with one of his brothers who shared his passion for fishing. In particular, he spent a good deal of time in the valley of the Avon Beg, which is where he set his 3 Wicklow plays, The Shadow of the Glen, The Tinker's Wedding, and The Well of the Saints. Now, it so happens, as Matthias has already said, that I grew up in that specific area. When I was young, my father used to read us these plays of Synge. He was a passionate enthusiasm for theatre, and when a student in Dublin in the 1930s, he had been what I think is called a stage door Johnny, befriending the actors at the Abbey Theatre. This is me, aged whatever I was then, maybe 6 or 7, at the time when I would have first heard the plays read aloud. I probably didn't take in very much of their subtleties. For me, what was so remarkable about them, that they were local plays. Towards the end of the Tinker's Wedding, they talk of spending their money on the green of Clash. This is Clash, short form of Ballinaclash, and that's our house right there, as it was then little more than a crossroads with a bridge. The big tree in front of the house is long gone, but the loft on the big barn on the left is now converted into a study, which is where I am delivering this lecture. In other respects, the house is still very much as it was. In the Well of the Saints, Mary Dole boasts of how they called her the beautiful dark woman Balnatone. Well, Balnatone was where I went to school. There it is. I walked the mile or so from our home each day from our home in Balnaclash. It was these names, Balnaclash, Balnatone, and so on, that leapt out of the plays for me, allowing me to imagine them happening, the plays happening in places that I knew so well. That was what first gave me my interest in Synge and led me eventually to write my doctoral dissertation on his work, and after that, books and articles. Synge published his impressions of the Wicklow landscape and its people in a number of travel essays. These represent the background for the plays, the materials he drew on to create the dramatic works. Although the setting in each case is quite specifically that one valley of the Avon Beg, he used stories and motifs gathered from elsewhere to create the finished plays. What I want to do this evening is to look first at the essays and then at the three Wicklow plays, The Shadow of the Glen first, then The Tinker's Wedding, and finally The Well of the Saints. My concern is with the imaginative process by which Synge turned places into plays. But if it doesn't seem too egotistical, I'd like also to show something of how, tracking after Synge, I came to develop my child's eye view of local plays into a fuller understanding. So I want to start with the essays. There were 6 of them in all. There they are. An Autumn Night in the Hills, published in 1903. The Oppression of the Hills, 1905. The Vagrants of Wicklow, 1906. The People of the Glens, 1907. At a Wicklow Fair, The Place and the People, 1907. And his final one, In Wicklow, On the Road. He died very young at in 1909. These were impressionistic pieces which appeared in Irish, American, and British papers and journals. In each case, a collage of experiences at different times. Although they were all published after the plays, when Synge had begun to make a name for himself as a playwright, they were written earlier and had been used as quarry for his dramatic work. An Autumn Night in the Hills is the only essay that tells a single story, how the writer went to fetch a pointer dog of my acquaintance, he calls it, that had been accidentally wounded in, quote, a wild glen on the western slope of County Wicklow. Here, as throughout his work, Synge is careful to avoid being too specific, but we know that the wild glen in question was Glen Malure, the top of the glacial valley through which the river Avon Beg runs. Avon Beg, from the Irish Awen Beag, means little river, and it merges with the Avon Moor at the meeting of the waters, made famous by a song of Thomas Moore. And yes, you guessed it, Avon Moor means big river. These images give you something of an idea of what Glen Malure looks like. On the right, the isolated farmhouse underneath Caraway Stick waterfall. On the left, Barravore at the top of the glen, with its background of the rocks left by the glacier's passage. Now there is the causeway you can see in front of you on the screen, but in Synge's day there was just a ford with a range of slippery stones, as he calls them in the essay, which he describes crossing to get to the cottage where the dog had been kept. The cottage was the home of the Harneys, 2 elderly brothers and a sister, all unmarried. The online 1901 Irish Census Records represents a terrific research resource where you can find out who was living in each house at the time, their names, ages, and marital status. And incidentally, we've just got the 1926 census up online. Absolutely fascinating. As it's had something like 20 million hits since it came on stream at the weekend. I've already looked up my own family in it. At the time Synge visited the Harney's cottage, what struck him most was the isolation of the place. The injured dog had been nursed back to health by a young girl, probably a niece of the Harneys who was staying with them at the time. The girl had become fond of the dog, and the old woman in the essay remarks, "It's herself will be lonesome when that dog is gone." That suggestion of the loneliness of living in Glenmalure with so few people nearby gave Synge the cue for the situation of Nora Burke, the central figure in The Shadow of the Glen, the play set in, quote, the last cottage at the head of a long glen in County Wicklow. The desolation of the place, so vividly evoked in the play, is brought out in the latter part of the essay also as Synge walked down the valley. He described it. The daylight still lingered, but the heavy rain and a thick white cloud that had come down made everything unreal and dismal to an extraordinary degree. I went up a road where on one side I could see the trunks of beech trees reaching up, wet and motionless, with odd sighs and movements when a gust caught the valley, into a greyness overhead where nothing could be distinguished. Between them there were masses of shadows and masses of half-luminous fog with black branches over them. Synge was always aware of the effect of the wild mountainous environment on the mental health of the people. This is the subject of his essay, The Oppression of the Hills. He comments there on what he calls a tendency of nervous depression among the people and every degree of sadness, from that of the man who is merely mournful to that of the man who spent half his life in the madhouse, is common among these hills. The most dramatic instance of this is the story that provided Synge with the basis for the figure of Patch Darcy, who's mentioned several times in The Shadow of the Glen. There was a poor fellow, he's being told this by someone he meets on the road. There was a poor fellow below reaping in the glen, and in the evening he had 2 glasses of whiskey with some other lads. Then some excitement took him, and he threw off his clothes and ran away into the hills. There was great rain that night, and I suppose the poor creature lost his way and was the whole night perishing in the rain and darkness. In the morning, they found his naked footsteps on some mud half a mile above the road, and again where you go up by a big stone. Then there was nothing known of him till last night, when they found his body on the mountain, and it near eaten by the crows. From local people, including a relative of the man who died, I was able to find out the details of this terrible story. And from a visit to the newspaper library of the British Museum, I was able to read the account of the inquest in the Wicklow People. But what really happened to that man remains as mysterious as ever. In his wanderings around Wicklow, Synge was always interested in the unusual figures that he met. We see this in several of his essays, The People of the Glens, in Wicklow on the Road, and most strikingly, I think, in The Vagrants of Wicklow. This is an illustration from the original publication of that essay, The Vagrants of Wicklow. In that essay, he writes of one tramp who married when he was over 90, quarreled violently with his wife, and was imprisoned. The indignity that the tramp most resented from his incarceration was having his long white hair cut off him. Quote, all his pride and his half-conscious feeling for the dignity of his age seemed to have set themselves on this long hair. The old man's fight with his wife and the store he set in his white hair gave Synge cues for Martin and Mary Dowell in The Well of the Saints. What's most evident in this essay, though, is the degree to which Synge identified with the vagrants he describes. He says towards the end of that essay, in the middle classes, the gifted son of a family is always the poorest, usually a writer or artist with no sense for speculation, and in a family of peasants, where the average comfort is just over penury, the gifted son sinks also and is soon a tramp on the roadside. The playwright was just such a middle-class dropout, not following a regular profession like his brothers, at odds with his family over religion and politics, his social situation, therefore, analogous to that of the vagrant. Most of the illustrations that Synge gives of people and places in the Wicklow essays were worked up from casual encounters, incidental experiences from his travels around the county. But as his work began to be published, he did sometimes set out to look for material actively. Such was the case with At Wicklow Fair, which was based on 2 separate visits to a fair in Aughrim in the summer of 1902. I have to confess I'm cheating a little bit. This is a photograph that Synge took of his visit to a fair, not in Aughrim, but in Rathdrum, which is actually the village closest to ourselves. At the start of that essay, he explains how he had to begin at dawn to walk the 10 or 12 miles from Anamo, where he was staying. It's an incidental reminder of the distances that Synge regularly walked. Google, I looked it up, gave the driving distance from Anamo to Aughrim as between 25 and 30 kilometers. This is quite some walk to do there and back in the day. The fair was a regular institution of the time where once a month or a fortnight farmers brought in their sheep, cattle, pigs and poultry for sale. On this slide, you may just be able to see behind the two men with the sticks, you may be able to see very faintly the figures of the sheep that are standing around loose there behind them on the fair green. At the fair, there was no auctioneer to organize the buying and selling, as in the latter-day marts, nor yet pens to hold the stock. Instead, there was a kind of melee of different flocks and herds, kept separate as best their owners could, with protracted negotiations between buyer and seller. Synge makes it a very colorful occasion in the essay, and it's here that he recounts the story on which he based The Tinker's Wedding. I have to say that my own childhood experiences of fairs were pretty miserable. You hung around outside while the men argued endlessly about prices, and at best you turned up sitting at a bar stool nursing a mineral, as soft drinks were then called, while the painfully agreed deal was given full alcoholic celebration. Synge set 3 of his plays in this one specific area, the valley that runs down from Glenmalure to Balnaclash. Place names in the plays often give a precise topography to the action. His impressions of the Wicklow Mountains, the people he met there, the stories are heard as recorded in the essays, all contributed to the creation of the dramatic works. But there were many other elements blended in as well in the complex imaginative process. What I want to do with the rest of my time this evening is to look in turn at the 3 Wicklow plays and show something of how they came together. And I'm going to start with the first of these, The Shadow of the Glen, which is actually the first performed of Synge's plays. Synge heard the story on which he based The Shadow of the Glen, not in Wicklow, but on Arran. It was on his first visit to Inishmaan, the middle of the 3 Arran Islands in 1898, that he was told this story by the old Shanachie, the storyteller. The traditional folktale, which has been collected in different forms all over Ireland, tells of the man who pretends to be dead to catch his wife courting with a neighbour. It was told to Synge, as was the norm with such stories, as though it was a first-hand experience of the storyteller, who collaborates with the dead man, as he's called throughout. The two enter the bedroom, sticks in hand, and catch the couple in bed together. The story ends with a dramatic revenge on the lover. The dead man hit him with a blow with the stick, so that the blood out of him leapt up and hit the gallery. In relocating the story to Wicklow, Synge turned it into something very different from the male triumphalist original. In the play, the central figure is that of the wife, Nora Burke, a younger woman married to an old man. It was a marriage of convenience based on material considerations, as Nora makes clear to Michael Dara, Dan Burke's potential successor, the man that she thinks that she may marry when Dan dies. "What way would I live," she said, "and I an old woman, if I didn't marry a man with a bit of a farm and sheep on the back hills?" And it has evidently been a loveless union. They've had no children, as Nora hints to the trans by. Maybe death, maybe cold would be no sign of death with the likes of him, she says, for he was always cold every day since I knew him, and every night, stranger. Synge's experience of the Harneys' cottage in An Autumn Night in the Hills may have partly suggested the loneliness of Nora's situation. She does seem to have discussed the possibility of a second marriage with the young shepherd Michael Dara, but his eagerness to count the money Dan has left when supposedly he's died makes it clear that this too would have been a marriage of convenience. It's no torrid lovemaking that the supposedly dead husband overhears, but Nora's sense of the futility of her life. Sitting, looking out from a door, the like of that door, and seeing nothing but the mists rolling down the bog, and the mists again, and they rolling up the bog, and hearing nothing but the wind crying out, and the bits of broken trees were left from the great storm, and the streams roaring with the rain. The original folk tale is a standard misogynist illustration of women's fickleness. The breath's no sooner out of the husband's bodies, but they're making love to someone else. Così fan tutte. They all do it. Synge turned it into a poignant imagination of the situation of a woman trapped in an unhappy marriage. But he also dramatized the mentality of the jealous husband. I came to realize this when, at the age of all of 18, in my first term as a university student, I was cast for the part of Dan Burke. I had to whiten my hair with clouds of talcum powder. I wouldn't need any talcum powder now, as you can see for yourselves. As I lay under the sheet at each performance, I was forced to imagine what sort of a man would do such a thing. The answer, as I came to realize, is there in the text. He was an old man and an odd man stranger, and it's always upon the hills he was, thinking thoughts in the dark mist. Dan too had been afflicted by what Synge called the oppression of the hills, and with him it took the form not just of jealousy, but a deep resentment of the very fact of his wife's youth. As he throws her out of the cottage at the end of the play, he vengefully repeats what he's heard her say of his own aging body. With a life wandering the roads, he tells her, "It's soon you'll be getting old. It's soon your teeth will be falling and your head will be the like of a bush where sheep to be lepping a gap." The oppression of the hills has given Dan his particular pathological obsession, but it has driven Patch Darcy mad. Synge gives to Patch the terrible ending of the man in the essay, his body found eaten by the crows. Yet Patch is also made into a semi-heroic figure, the type of the skillful mountain shepherd, praised as such by the tramp. There was never ever a lamb from his own yowes he wouldn't know before it was marked. And he'd run from this to the city of Dublin and never catch for his breath. By contrast, Michael Dara doesn't know how to drive mountain yowes, is a kind of farmer, has come up from the sea to live in the cottage beyond, someone whose ineptitude with herding sheep is brought out by contrast with the mountain herds like Patch Darcy. The immediacy of the wild natural world of living in the mountains brings exposure and vulnerability. But there may be ways of coping with that situation, so at least the tramp suggests when he persuades Nora to come with him after Dan has thrown her out. Michael Dara, of course, has no time for her without the much-needed dowry. He says, "We'll be going now, I'm telling you, and the time you'll be feeling the cold and the frost and the great rain and the sun again and the south wind blowing in the glens. You'll not be sitting up on a wet ditch the way you're after sitting in this place, making yourself old with looking on each day and it passing you by. You'll be saying one time, 'It's a grand evening by the grace of God,' and another time, 'It's a wild night, God help us, but it'll pass surely.'" It is this fine bit of talk that makes Nora decide to join the tramp for a life on the roads, rough as she knows it will be. It's a tiny play, The Shadow of the Glen, which runs for no more than 25-30 minutes in performance, but it's extraordinarily subtle and suggestive in its social grounding and its shifting dramatic tone. As I said earlier, it was at the Aughrim Fair that Synge heard the story that provided him with the plot for The Tinker's Wedding, which is the play I want to go on to now. This is the story as he was told it. A tinker and his woman went up to a priest in the hills and asked him would he wed them for half a sovereign. The priest said it was a poor price, but he'd wed them surely if they'd make him a tin can along with it. "I'll wait at faith," said the tinker, "and I'll come back when it's done." They went off then, and in 3 weeks they came back, and they asked the priest would he wed them a second time. "Have you the tin can?" said the priest. "We have not," said the tinker. "We had it made at the fall of night, but the ass gave it a kick this morning the way it isn't fit for you at all." "Go on now," said the priest. "It's a pair of rogues and schemers you are, and I won't wed you at all." They went off then, and they were never married to this day. You have to be aware of the context here. Synge is told the story by a herd who's just been mocked by the tinker for his lack of herding skills. A tinker, that is, a tinsmith, was part of the nomadic traveller community, people that have always been an object of suspicion and contempt within the settled rural community. It's likely that the account Synge was given in The Vagrants of Wicklow of the annual tinker matchmaking session with casual wife swapping with another malicious fiction. Most travellers are Catholics, devout Catholics, and have a long-standing tradition of early monogamous marriage. However, it suited Synge for the purposes of this play to imagine them as pagan people, free of convention, tangling with a priest as the representative of the church. In The Tinker's Wedding, the play, Sarah Casey is determined to marry Michael Byrne. Her partner of many years, with whom she's already raised several children. As in the story, she makes a bargain with the priest to marry them for 10 shillings and a tin can. The deal goes wrong, however, when Mary Byrne, Michael's mother, who lives with them, steals the can to buy drink, and the priest refuses to go ahead with the ceremony. It's here that the play takes a different turn from the story. When the priest threatens to inform on the tinker's crimes, they turn on him, tie him up, gag him, only letting him go when he swears an oath not to go to the police. He sticks to that promise, only call down the vengeance of God upon them, at which point they run off terrified. It's a rough comedy in every sense of the word. The violence of the tinkers against the priest and one another is not minimized. The piquancy is in the complete lack of deference shown to the man that is referred to throughout by them as your reverence. Mary offers him a drink from her more than half-empty jug of porter, pats him on his knee, and asks him innocently to recite a prayer. For I've heard a power of queer things and I walk in the world, but there's one thing I never heard any time, and that's a real priest saying a prayer. When in the second act the priest reneges on his bargain and tells the tinkers to run off, Michael responds derisively, "Is it run from the like of you, Holy Father? Go up to your own shanty, or I'll beat you with the ass's reins till the world would hear you roaring from this place to the coast of Clare." The inveterate pagan Mary Byrne speaks for the natural life of the tinkers as she sits on the priest's head. "It's sick and sorry we are to tease you, but what did you want, meddling with the likes of us? When it's a long time we are going our own ways, father and son, and his son after him, or mother and daughter, and her daughter again, and it's little need we ever had of going up into a church." When the play was published in 1907, Synge made a plea for tolerance in his preface. He said, "I do not think these country people who have so much humour themselves will mind being laughed at without malice, as the people in every country have been laughed at in their own comedies." It was not put to the test of performance. The Abbey directors, in that very year, 1907, when the Playboy of the Western World had caused riots, decided that it was too immoral for Dublin, as Synge put it wryly in a letter to a friend. In point of fact, I saw the Irish premiere of the play, The Tinker's Wedding, in the Abbey in 1971 during the celebration of the centenary of Synge's birth, nearly 70 years after it was written. Unfortunately, I don't have an image of that original production, but to give you a flavour of the play, this is the great Irish actor Mary Mullen playing Mary Byrne in Druid Synge, the marathon production of all Synge's plays in 2005. Synge heard the story that formed the basis of The Shadow of the Glen on Arran and relocated it to Wicklow. For The Will of the Saints, the last of the three Wicklow plays I want to talk about, he went much further afield in both time and space for his source. The play seems to have been prompted by a medieval play, La Moralité de l'aveugle et du boiteux by André de la Vigne. For the record, that's what the original manuscript looks like. Synge read about it. I don't think he read the original text, but he read about it in a book by Petit de Juleville, one of his professors in the Sorbonne. The story, sorry, I'm caught up in my text here. The story features a begging partnership between a blind man and a lame man who goes as navigator on his back. They're cured of their disabilities when they stumble into the cortege of St. Martin. The play was put on as part of a performance in honour of the saint. The blind man marvels at the gift of his newfound sight, but the lame man laments that he will no longer be able to beg for his living. And then he thinks to himself, well, he can pretend to be lame and go on begging in spite of being cured. Synge took relatively little from this beyond the idea that a miracle cure is not necessarily always appreciated. Martin and Mary Dole, the blind beggars of the play, have been convinced that they are supremely beautiful by the local villagers. When their sight is restored by the holy water carried by a wandering saint, they're so disillusioned with the reality that they fall out violently with one another. When they become blind again, they're reconciled, and they reimagine an idea of their beauty. Mary with magnificent white hair, Martin with a long silver beard. But this moment of illusion is threatened with the return of the saint, who offers to cure them once again. This time it will be permanently. Martin pretends to agree to the cure, only to knock the can with the miracle working water out of the saint's hands. The villagers are so outraged by this blasphemy that they drive the beggars away out of the village. Synge set the play in some lonely mountainous district on the east of Ireland 1 or more centuries ago. The vagueness of the time setting was perhaps designed to make the figure of the wandering saint more plausible, but once again the play is quite precisely located. The first and third acts take place at the crossroads of Grene. This is what it looks like now. I took the photograph just a few days ago. And it's the middle act. This would have been an advantageous place. The crossroads would have been an advantageous place for begging because of the meeting of the roads there and the fact that there was a church just down on the left of the slide, just a little out of sight there. There was a church. The second act is set in the blacksmith's forge in Ballinaclash, possibly in the backyard of my own house. At one point, this certainly was the position of the forge of George Smith. This is a drawing of him, which I got from his descendant, a grandson of his, with the long beard that Martin Dole imagined for himself. The character of Timmy in the play is referred to somewhat peculiarly as Timmy the Smith. He's always addressed and called Timmy the Smith. My guess is that Synge picked up this, calling him Timmy the Smith, from the identity of name and profession of the then blacksmith of Ballinaclash. I remember George Smith's son, Jim Smith, as a very bad-tempered old man in the dark forge, which was then set up at the other side of the village, where I had to spend hours waiting while horses of ours were being shod. Not really the most entertaining of occupations. You just had to hold the horse's head throughout. The play represents an ironic parable on the relation between reality and illusion. Martin and Mary are contented when they can believe. They are fine looking, extremely unhappy when they discover they're anything but. There's a sense of the piercing quality of the vision of the newly sighted, as Martin describes when trying to persuade Mary Byrne, the beautiful village girl, to run away with him. He says, "It's few sees anything, but them is blind for a space. It's few sees the old women rotting for the grave. It's few sees the like of yourself. Though it's shining you are, like a high lamp would drag in the ships out of the sea." The marginal figures of the blind beggars are here set against the conformist people of the village. The same opposition as in Synge's other Wicklow plays, the tramp in Shadow of the Glen, the tinkers in The Tinker's Wedding. Although the beggars are ironically treated in their vanity and their clinging to illusion, yet Synge gives to Martin a defiant challenge to orthodoxy in his final assertion to the saint of the different imagination of the blind. "If it's a right some of you have to be working and sweating the like of Timmy the Smith, and a right some of you have to be fasting and praying and talking holy talk the like of yourself, I'm thinking it's a good right ourselves have to be sitting blind, hearing a soft wind turning round the little leaves of the spring and feeling the sun, and we not tormenting our souls with the sight of the grey days and the holy men and the dirty feet is trampling the world." There he is, J.M. Synge, photograph taken of him in Edinburgh, I think, formal study. There was a literalist dimension to Synge's imagination. He liked to be able to anchor his plays in a specific reality that he could visualize. So The Shadow of a Glen is set in a cottage like that of the Harneys at the head of Glenmalure, which he'd visited when going to collect the dog. Both the Tinker's Wedding and the Well of the Saints are placed between Grene and Ballinaclash, just 2 miles apart. Why did he choose this one specific area for his Wicklow plays, given that it is some considerable distance away from Glanmore, seat of the Synge estate, and the nearby houses such as Castle Kevin, where he spent so many summer holidays? The answer may well be for that very reason. In his Wicklow essays, Synge is careful to mask his own identity as well as those of the people he meets. At one point in The People of the Glens, an old man, when he learns Synge's name, launches into the history of the Synges in Wicklow. The playwright very much wanted to avoid this sort of social identification as part of a Protestant landowning elite, and it might have made it easier in the valley of the Avon Beg, not, so to speak, in Synge's own backyard. It was many years after first hearing my father act out the Wicklow plays that I came to read Synge's other works, his extraordinary one-act tragedy, Riders to the Sea, his great masterpiece, The Playboy of the Western World, that continues to hold the stage. The most recent revival was at the National Theatre in London last autumn, and I think is actually going on tour. But the 3 plays set in Wicklow have continued to have a special place in my affections. Initially, this was because they were on my own home territory: Clash, Balnatone, Grene, Glenmalure. These were real places to me, and the plays took on an extra vividness because of that. But as I continued to study Synge, and I've been at it now for some 60 years, they came to represent to me a fascinating example of the workings of a dramatist's imagination. The places are there in the essays: the desolate Wicklow hills, the isolated people who live among them. But in the mind of the playwright, they grow into something else, their own distinctive dramatic spaces that are not limited to one time or location. I hope in my talk tonight I've given you some sense of that creative process and conveyed something of my excitement in following it through. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much for that very intriguing talk, and I'm really excited about how you connected kind of your home turf to Synge. It was so interesting, and I'm quite sure that all of the people who turned on their cameras immediately at the end of the talk do have questions. Am I right? So if you have a question, just show your hand or show a digital hand, and I'll call you out. Yeah, Miriam Snyder-Kerber was the first, and then Matthias Fleckenstein.
Thank you so much for the talk. I have a question about this transformation of moving from places into plays. And when reading your title already, but also in listening, I was thinking about the way in which plays can do this maybe in a more immediate way than transforming from places to novels, right? Or places to, other written forms. I wonder if you could say a little bit about how places and theater as a particular kind of place and interaction, how those are connected.
Well, I mean, I suppose it's a very good question. I suppose the most obvious, let me see, close all browsers. Okay. I suppose the most obvious way is that, obviously an audience is going to see an actual place on stage. They're going to see a space of some sort. It may be fully realized as, a cottage kitchen, as in The Shadow of the Glen, or it can be much more impressionistically created. But for Synge particularly, I think he wanted to be able to see a space, see an actual space, and then put it into a play. When his plays were staged, this was a time when there wasn't such a thing as the director as we now know it, but he effectively directed his plays very often, and he was very, very insistent that it should be exactly as he imagined it. And I think that this connection between a place, a real place, and what you create on stage has got a kind of immediacy, because you are recreating another place, if you like, on stage. So I think you're quite right in saying that there's something more important in the transformation from places to plays than perhaps in novels or poems.
Thank you. Yeah, Matthias, you did have a question as well.
Yeah, I've not so much as a question, but I would like to thank you, Nicholas, for showing really the connection between the plays and the places, because there's many of them are so familiar for me. And I know the valley in Glenmalure, I know the crossroads you showed on the photograph. So it was like coming home and seeing these places in a different light now. And what I also thought was very interesting was the link between the essays and the plays, and to hear about what was going on, what was the background of the plays, how did they develop or evolve from the essays, or do they have to do with the essays? So thanks very much for this interesting insight.
Yes.
Thank you very much for the appreciative comment.
Yes, thank you. Before I let you talk, Maria, maybe one remark by me. I had, please, Nicholas, tell me if you think that's something one can say about the two different genres. But to me, it seemed as if the essays are something like a sketch, and then the plays are kind of the painting that he's creating. So the essays are more like, you know, a study, and then he turns it into kind of a masterpiece or something. Would you say there's something like that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good analogy. It's a bit complicated in terms of the actual composition of the essays and the plays, because the essays, as I said, were a kind of collage, and some of them went back a long time before he actually wrote any of the plays, but some of them are you know, he's working on them while he's also working on the plays. But perhaps if you think of a painter who, even while he's starting, he's doing his big oil masterpiece, is also sketching away in his sketchbook to try this and try that. I think it's a very good analogy.
Yeah, thank you. Maria, you have a question.
Yes, thank you. And thank you for the wonderful talk. I really enjoyed listening to it. I have a question on a very general question. What would you say, what does John Millington Synge mean to Ireland today? So what is his role? Or would you say there is kind of a continued relevance in modernization? Because what I know is that his work is still discussed in relation to Ireland's kind of rapid modernization, and his plays explore the tension between tradition and change. And maybe it's kind of can be discussed before the background of a disappearance of a way of life. Would you agree? Or how do you see that?
Yes, it's hard to say. I mean, for a long time, Synge was regarded as, you know, a classic back then, you know, part of the early Irish National Theatre movement, and you know, didn't I suppose was appreciated at that level. I think that Druid Synge production in 2004, 2005 that put all of the plays on stage again and took them abroad to New York and so on. I think that did change people's views. And I've written about some modern productions of the plays where I think there is a sense now of greater connection with Synge. It's really hard to say about the question of sort of changing the loss of an older version of Ireland, because really the changes that we've undergone in the last 30 years are of a scale that's really quite unlike anything else that we've experienced. I mean, it is just such a transformed situation, not least because we have this extraordinary economy with billions of euro all coming from American globalized companies, so that it's sort of off scale. But I think you're right that people have been able to connect to Synge in a new way in the 21st century. And I don't want to plug my own wares, but I've written a book called Irish Theatre in the 21st Century a couple of years ago. And I do have a chapter there that looks specifically at productions of Synge and the way in which there is a kind of new modern sense of his work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, because I think he's circling very strongly around these tensions between modernization and tradition, and this is why I'm asking. Yeah, thank you very much.
Yes, thank you. Any more questions? Yeah, Monsieur Rida, go ahead.
Yes, hi. Thank you for the talk.
Hello.
Hello. I think I have two questions. One might be too big for this round. So, I read a lot of W.B. Yeats and Irish revival literature, and I just started reading Synge. And when thinking about his, I don't know, work in the revival, I was always thinking about how he constructs or deconstructs rather the national idea of Ireland in his writings. And when we talk of creating spaces or places, and we're talking about the Aran Islands, I was wondering how stylized or how constructed is his idea of the Aran Islands and the Aran Islanders in his writings?
Yeah, very good. Let me think a bit. I'll start with the Aran first. The book, The Aran Islands, which is the account of his visits there, 5 visits in all between 1898 and 1902, is very much a constructed one. He had an idea of the Aran Islands as a kind of primitive space, and very much cherished it for that reason. We were just talking a minute ago about the conflict between the modern and the archaic or an older form. He saw the Aran Islands as preserving a kind of older version of Irish culture, and loved his experience of the Aran Islands for that reason. And to some extent, I think the Aran Islands, the book, is a construction of that view of Aran. In fact, it wasn't altogether accurate. And there's a brilliant essay by my alas late colleague, the historian David Fitzpatrick, which shows just how modernized the Aran Islands already were, and to some extent the way in which you can actually see that within Synge's text, even though he does something to kind of mask it. When it comes to the plays, I very much liked your sense that he is in the business of deconstructing a traditional idea of Ireland. Certainly, I think to some extent, deconstructing a revivalist idea of Ireland. Synge's version of Ireland is by no means romanticized. Those are quite sort of ironic, satiric plays, Playboy of the Western World, about somebody who's hero worshipped because the people think that he's killed his father, and then attack him when it turns out he hasn't killed his father. That's a very kind of quizzical view of the west of Ireland, this kind of sanctified area in the Irish nationalist iconography. So I think Synge, because of a certain sort of realism in the imagination of Ireland, is actually to some extent at odds with a revivalist notion. So I think where I would see the Aran Islands as to some extent collaborating in the revivalist project of a kind of primitive, archaic, idealized Ireland and Irish culture, I think the plays do, to a large extent, to pick up your word, deconstruct that image with their own harsh, tragicomic, satiric view of Ireland. Does that sound so? It answers your question?
Yeah. I think it does, yeah. What I think is interesting when reading the Aran Islands is that you have that idea of the Irish peasant who is, I don't know, one with nature or even a victim of nature somehow. And then you read, for example, Riders to the Sea, which echoes this idea. But when you look at, for example, masculinity in Riders to the Sea or the Aran Islands, you really have that going against the nationalist or revival idea of Yeats, for example, where he calls to arms in Kathleen Ní Houlihan. So this is really the deconstruction which I read in my reading of Synge.
Yeah. Yes, I mean, I would have to say in relation to Yeats, Kathleen Ní Houlihan is not very typical of Yeats's work, and in fact, we do now know that it's more than half Lady Gregory's work. I think it won Yeats great credit with the nationalist audiences and readers, but I think one has to say not altogether typical. But it's a good point you make about the I suppose almost passive view of masculinity that you get certainly in Riders to the Sea, a kind of fatalist acceptance that all that men can do is to go out and potentially be drowned. Very little of the sort of activist view that you get in Kathleen Ní Houlihan.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? Yeah, then maybe Marie?
Just a very brief one, because we're talking about the Aran Islands. And do you know how authentic the language is that he uses in his work when he refers to the dialect that is spoken there? I'm just curious because I don't.
Yeah. Well, there's a whole controversy associated with it. And I think I would have to say it's not authentic at all in terms of reproducing the way in which people at the time would have spoken in the Aran Islands or elsewhere. What he's done in his particular kind of stage language is to use the substrate of the Irish language, as does appear in Irish English, Hiberno English, but he has greatly exaggerated it so that he uses rhythms and constructions which are carried over from Irish, but with a kind of frequency and intensity which you wouldn't get in normal Irish country speech at his time, I think, certainly not now. I think that because he's attracted to a kind of poetic dimension to the language of Irish speakers thinking in English, as it were, he came to use that as a dialect, which he uses for all the plays. I mean, he uses it for Wicklow as well as for Bright as the Sea, set in Thing, or Playboy of the Western World. I mean, in fact, Irish dialect is very different from one region to another, as I'm sure it is in Germany. So I think he has in his head a kind of speech which does relate to the speech of native Irish speakers speaking English, but it is not just a reproduction, certainly, of the speech of the Aran Islanders or the country people of his time.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much. I don't know if that is. Oh, Matthias, I see you. I'll let you. Do you want to stay with the Aran Islands? Because I have a question for the Aran Island topic. Otherwise,
I have a more general question, so go ahead maybe with.
Yeah, maybe it's also not even a question, Nicholas. I was just thinking that many people here are who are here tonight are attending a class I'm teaching on Irish American literature, history, and culture, and we are reading two plays, and we're reading O'Neill's A Touch of the Poet, where we have this character who believes of himself to be, or stylizes himself as a hero, where I see a lot of connections to the Playboy. Also, O'Neill was heavily influenced by the tour of the Abbey Theatre, the US tour in the, I think, second decade of the 20th century, where they would present a lot of, or a number at least, of Synge plays. And then the other text, and that would be where we stay on the Aran Islands, that's MacDonough's The Cripple of Inishmaan. And I think that the whole thing about the tragic comedy, and then also this aspect of not exactly only the language, but I think the authenticity or inauthenticity of presenting the Aran Islanders in a certain kind of way, I think also comes up, and I have the feeling that both O'Neill and MacDonagh as different by Synge. I don't know if you have any comments on it.
I mean, there's no question that O'Neill was influenced by, as you say, the visit of the Abbey Theatre in 1912, I believe, is what he often credited with him becoming a playwright at all. He was so struck by what he saw. I mean, the contrast with O'Neill, obviously, is with his father and his father's work in melodrama. And for him, the Abbey players produced a kind of reality on stage that inspired him. And Synge would certainly have been a part of that. I have to say, when he does Irish dialect, it's painfully inauthentic to my mind, but not to worry about that. Martin McDonagh, I was told by Gary Hines that a researcher came to Galway researching Martin McDonagh's plays and was earnest to go to the Aran Islands. And Gary told the researcher, well, you're ahead of Martin McDonagh then, because he's never been to the Aran Islands. I mean, I think that with McDonagh, he claims never to have read Synge before he wrote his plays, but he does actually quote he does quote from Synge in one of his titles. I think he probably had seen or heard at least of the plays. I think with McDonagh, you're into a different level of postmodern pastiche. I mean, there's no question that he's getting at Synge and that Synge is a presence there. But I think he is very much in the business of sending up, other versions of Ireland. So in The Cripple of Inishmaan, it's really all about the 1930s film of Arran, and MacDonagh takes his own kind of sardonic pleasure in, as it were, getting behind that kind of fake image from his point of view of Arran. I mean, obviously, the Irish-American connection is enormously important, but I think the authenticity, I think one has to go rather cautiously about, particularly in relation to MacDonagh, where I don't think there's any question of authenticity whatsoever. It's just not a value for him.
Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. Matthias, I kept you for
thanks. Just a short question, Nicholas. You mentioned current productions of Synge's plays in Ireland. Do you have any idea about his popularity internationally at the moment? Do you know of any productions in other countries than Ireland?
Well, the National Theatre production in London that was on this last autumn, and which I think is touring within Britain, and I think is going to be available on NT Live or whatever they call it. It tends to be the Playboy of the Western World. I mean, most of the other plays are not staged internationally, but there was a production. I've written a bit about this. There was a production by Pan, which was actually staged in Mandarin, in Chinese. The Playboy of the Western World has been staged across the world. It's seen, I think, as a play that has got that kind of quality that can be reach across from its original language. So I think productions of the Playboy are still quite current. Going back a while, I mean, I can remember going to a production in Brittany where the Synge's language was translated into a kind of Breton flavored French, which was very controversial at the time. So yeah, I mean, I think there's still currency there for Synge's plays. Or rather play, it really is always Play with the Western World. And that's why the big Druid Synge production of all the plays was something of an eye-opener for the people who saw it in the US, for instance.
Thank you.
Yeah, Professor Achilles.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, thank you very much again for this very interesting and also very personal talk in many ways. It's nice to have such a personal relationship of study. I have a question about the Synge canon. I think you mentioned the word masking and camouflage, that I always had the feeling that he is, in general, writing about forms of emancipation, ironicized maybe, but in the case of the Playboy, for instance, liberation movement, in the sense that in the sense that the villagers don't follow. He's practically saying the gap, it's easy to verbalize your interest in independence, but it's a different matter to actually do something about it. There's a difference between the gala story and the dirty deed. But nevertheless, of course, the Playboy is a rebel, and so are the tramp and the blind couple who insist on their own way of perceiving reality. And of course, this is true of all of the plays, one could say, with one exception, namely The Riders to the Sea, which is dramatically not set in Wicklow, but I always had the feeling that this is an exception to this emancipation theme, that he is, by being so specific about his provincial settings, also pushing away from himself. It's as if he were saying, it's not about me personally. This is not my desire for freedom from strictures, which he didn't want to address and identify personally. But The Riders to the Sea is devoid of that. I always had the feeling this is not. I mean, even Deirdre of the Sorrows, you can say the couple is choosing their own death against the legend, against the myth. But in Riders of the Sea, Riders to the Sea, I don't see any of that rebellious spirit that I think informs his whole canon.
Thanks very much, Shokin. It's nice to hear from you. Yeah, I mean that's really less a question than an essay. A very fine analysis of the theme of liberation, emancipation in Synge, which I think is very much there, as you say, the whole way through. And I think that there is a kind of ironic relationship to this is the period at which we're working up to 1916. There is a very strong separatist movement within Ireland, and I think one of the problems about the Playboy of the Western World is that one of the things that threw the audience originally is that sense of the individual impulse towards emancipation, liberation, is confused, as it were, contaminated with the desire for rebellion. So the idea of killing the father is a very obvious figure for independence, emancipation, and yet the Christy Mahan, who actually has tried that, is vilified by the villagers who do not want to follow him by any means. I think that what Synge is projecting there is a notion of freedom. Freedom of difference, freedom of individuality, which is set against other illusions, as it were, of freedom. And even though he was a nationalist, I don't think he was a great supporter of. I know he wasn't a supporter of the idea of revolutionary nationalism, and I think that his idea of emancipation was one that is cultivated within the individual, where very often the community are not carried with them. I think you're absolutely right that Rise to the Sea is exceptional in this, as in so much else, and it doesn't have that. But I think you're right that this is the theme that runs through the rest of the work.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have more? Yeah, Rabiana Stola has a question. Go ahead.
I have a question relating back to the accuracy of accent, or rather the inaccuracy, because it sounded like it's something that's done badly quite often. Is there an example off the top of your head where it's actually done well in an Irish accent in a play?
I mean, if you look at any of the productions by Druid, they did film that Druid Synge, and it is available. And by the time Druid started, sorry, this may go on too long. I'll try and cut it short. by the time Druid started, 1975, and they started producing Synge's plays in the 1980s, there was a strong tradition of what you call, quite rightly, inauthentic accent, inauthentic use of the language, which had developed over years in productions in the Abbey Theatre, which had become very kind of hackneyed. And I think one of the things that the Druid company discovered, because they all came from the west of Ireland, is that they had a connection with Synge because their own natural voices, as it were much closer to the sort of language of Synge. So I think if you watch any of those productions by the Druid company, you'll get something that is certainly to my ear an excellent rendering of what Synge wanted in the way of language.
Okay, thank you very much. Last question, Matthias.
Just got the DVDs of the Druid Synge plays. So if you are interested to watch them, you can have it to watch it together with the students or whatever circle you would like to.
Yeah, thanks very much.
Yeah.
Okay, any more pressing questions at this point? If not, I'd like to thank you very much for this really engaging talk about Synge. I mean, I think it opened up a whole range of new ideas about Synge and the regionalism of Synge that at least I hadn't seen to such extent before. So thank you very much. I hope everyone here enjoyed the talk as much as the Irish Studies Würzburg people did. I hope, Nicholas, you did enjoy preparing this presentation and also engaging with us. Everyone who was here will receive an email asking for feedback. Would be very happy if you wouldn't we're happy about the positive feedback that I can already see in the chat, but you can also put it into words as a reply to our feedback email, and then we'll put it on our homepage, and we'll also let Nicholas know about the positive feedback. So thank you very much, everybody. We have a couple more events this semester. We have a linguistic paper by Kate Talon from Oxford University, which is also online, so everyone can join. And we are participating in the Ephesus Roundtable discussion, where we launched the second themed issue of The Animal in Ireland, Real and Imagined, that a number of us edited, and it comes out of a conference we had here at Würzburg. And then for those of you who are in Würzburg, we have a fourth event this semester, a talk by a colleague from Turkey who will talk about female identity in Irish and Iranian literature. So quite pertinent topic, I think, in many respects, female identity, Iranian literature. So if you're at all interested, go to our homepage and sign up for these other events. So that's it from me for now. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for very good questions.